do it from the beginning. So this is Shin Jinseo's game. Yes. And Shin Jinseo has black, and Li Qincheng has white. Yes, this tournament is being played online. Just the traveling through between countries is so difficult that are not doing it face to face yet. So it is being played on the internet, and the players are generally in their associations with referees watching them. There's not much opportunity for anything fishy happening. So although we have smartphones like this, which are better than professional players, so they're stronger than me. Or programs on a computer, of course, are strong. But the players are at their associations with referees watching, and so I guess it's safe for them to be playing online. So there's Korean players, a player in Taipei, there's a Japanese player, and there's some Chinese players. So that's what we have at this stage of the tournament. And I'm sure it was a similar setup for the European and the American players. So I was talking about this variation so far. It looks fairly even. With black, I would be feeling okay because black's group is alive and white's sort of floating there. But it's probably about even shape. And so I talked about this variation in the upper right. Let's go back to that a little bit. So this is a position where black does have a choice of 4 moves, extending in one or two directions, or playing a hane in one of the 2 directions. And so when black plays a hane, it usually involves this ladder, which in this case is good for white. And if white can escape the ladder, even if white ends up sacrificing the cornerstone. So for instance, a shape like this, white would be losing the cornerstone, the stone in the corner, but would be having forcing moves from the outside, which looks like it makes this a feasible variation for white. So white would be making a sacrifice there towards the corner. Otherwise, if black plays from above, this is usually just bad for black. So like something like this and something like this. This kind of fight is usually going to be bad for black. And so since the latter favored white, black played a relatively pacific variation here. And here is where black had the choice of playing towards the left. And I was suggesting this move, I believe. Or continuing in the center. So it sort of made sense to me when he played towards the left side of the board in this case. But he went back to the center. So they're fighting here. And this is a position where black did have a ladder-like shape. So if black played here, the fact that the ladder doesn't work makes this bad for black. So if the ladder does work, it would be good for black. And so, yes. So if white had answered that move, then that's what black would have done. And if black can enclose white there, even if white somehow manages to live, it's going to be very painful. White can probably make 2 eyes with this move. For instance, something like this. White does, in a pinch, white would have in a pinch, white would have a potential eye here. But would probably start with doing stuff like this. And it's going to be very difficult for black to continue trying to kill that. So black's not going to do that, and white's going to live, but the fact that black has surrounded white like this, it would probably make this a good variation for black. So white did not answer the ladder break. With this, it's going to be difficult for black to escape in the center, because if black cuts here, this is just a very dangerous and painful shape for black. So getting into a clump of stones like this is just not working. The important thing to notice is that the players are ignoring the threat of black breaking through here. It's not worth it for black. And so white's not stopping black from breaking through there to a certain extent. And black's not even trying to. So for instance, it would be something like this. Black would be able to break through to a degree, but would have to go back here and would not be getting any significant profit out of this. So that's what looks like it's breaking through white's position. It's not gaining anything. It's this kind of thing that weaker players can easily make this mistake. The answer to Derek's question is I don't know. Not in any tournaments that I've played has anyone been caught cheating. But like cheating is so easy now with as I was saying, a smartphone can have an app that is stronger than me. So in that way, cheating is easy, and it's dealt with by having people give up their smartphones. So actually, people have been caught with cell phones or smartphones. Probably they just forgot to put them in the locker. So they weren't actually cheating, but they do forfeit a game if they're caught carrying the smartphone. So that's the extent of my knowledge of people cheating. There have been some cases which are publicized, I believe, and I believe both in China and Korea. And there could be similar cases in Japan. I wouldn't be surprised. It's just so easy that I'm pretty sure that someone would be tempted. So black has lost the fight in the center and is hoping to get redemption by attacking white's territory on the right. Yes, the submit button. It just depends on the way the app is set up, actually. Professional players are pretty used to playing on the net, and when you get used to it, you actually, personally, I would say I feel more at home just clicking the one time and playing my move. And submitting the move with just a single click doesn't seem to be a big issue for me. So I guess that that's something that can be changed, but most people, there are some servers with applications that do allow you to do a second click to choose your move, but it's not the popular way to do it for professionals. It's just not a part of the culture, you might say. Okay, so black is trying to scoop out the right side here. And so how is this going to work? It's a huge fight. Okay, so at this point, black is threatening a ladder. So if white plays underneath, then black can win with this ladder. So white has to answer that. And it looks like a race to capture, which is probably going to be a ko or something. So this position on the right side, it doesn't look like it's decided yet. In fact, it looks like white might have White has a ko at least. It's going to be a ko probably. Derek, I'm not going to answer that question. Okay. Um, well, Risto is saying it was only about a few years since cheating had started. It's because that until AlphaGo, the players were definitely stronger than the computer programs, and so there was no use in using an app. Okay, so we have this position in the right side. Um, I can try a variation. So white probably has to start with the wedge here. So like this, it looks a bit more difficult for white. So if we have something like this is going to be an eye against no eye, where white cannot feel any liberties. So this is a win for black. Okay, that's an interesting question from Derek. How do I think players of today with Katago training would fare against the Lee et al. Version of AlphaGo? And I think the context has to be that it's playing on the Google supercomputer, because actually AlphaGo, it probably doesn't even function without that computer program. So it's using a huge amount. As far as I understand, it seems to be using a huge amount of calculating power, which is what made it so strong. I'd say that the modern pros with Katago training would be, or Katago, some of them are using fine art. There's various programs that are used. They would do well up to a certain point and would have trouble winning in the end. Like the computer program, even the Lee et al. Version of AlphaGo, even that, it plays very solidly and without any mistakes. No obvious mistakes. Makes it very difficult to, and humans do make mistakes, so they would gradually lose ground. I would say that the Katago trained opening would be sufficiently better than what the Lee et al. Version of AlphaGo had for the human players to take an advantage, but human players would have a hard time keeping it. No. The Lee et al. Version was on a laptop, but it was on a screen. No, but they had a link to they had an internet link to the computer in England, if I recall correctly. Yeah, it was connected to the cloud or something. I remember that the people with DeepMind, um, they had their own cables. They were not trusting the hotel's cables for the internet. They were being very. They were most afraid of getting cut off. That was what they were afraid of more than anything else. Okay, people are saying various things about AlphaGo, the computing resources, and I wouldn't be surprised if most of you, well, some of you at least, will know more about that than myself. So I probably shouldn't comment too much, as I'm not sure I know completely. In fact, I'm sure I don't know completely. I'll leave that conversation to you guys. They did, yes. Bug Kitten said that Google invented a new type of processor. So we use what are called GPUs, graphics processors unit uh, units, and they invented something called a TPU, which was set up for basically was set up to do neural network type things. So it was working very well in that way. Right. Yes, I think I do remember that the later versions of AlphaGo, they actually needed less of the TPUs, yes. F6 and H6, they do take away a lot of white's potential towards the center. They are a well-connected shape. Okay. Thank you, Go Baduk. Hmm. Okay, Atapino is asking if the AI is like a telescope that looks out into the game of Go, how much of the game is believed to be still undiscovered? Um, I think it's more than half. Um, top human players have pretty much fairly consistently, the top human players have been saying that maybe they understand only something like 5% of the game. And that's sort of a quote from a number of top players throughout history almost, um, or at least the last 100 years. And I think the computer programs we have now are significantly better than that, but there's still only a few 10 of percents. So the great majority of the game is still, I would say it's still undiscovered. Okay, Leonardo, good night. I understand it's a difficult time for some of you players. So you can watch the video later. Okay, so another problem with the right side, I should say, is that when black crawls here, white generally wants to fill a liberty like this. And they're going to be fighting a ko here on the right. But also there's the issue of this move, which with the cut here, this is setting up a little ladder here. So it didn't work yet, but that cut at 8 is a very powerful move, which would be very painful for white if black got to do this. So So there's a problem there. And if white answers it on this side, then now black is going to have stuff like this that black can do. Probably use it as co-threats also. And white does have a very uncomfortable shape there in the center. So there's this painful position here in the center. In order to avoid that, white would have to play here. That would make the fight on the right here. Black would have a decisive advantage. So that's one thing. Okay, so was making that fight difficult for white. And it turns out white just sacrificed the stones. So white sacrificed these stones. I'd say the whole fight here, black has accomplished what he set out to do. He's erased the right side territory and taken some territory of his own. And in return, white got some points towards the center. But it's, as you can see, it's not really developing into a full board thing. So black has managed to sacrifice the cutting stone on a small scale and get some profit on the right side, which was what he set out to do, and it seems to have worked fairly well. So at this point, the rest of the board is the lower part of the board. The upper side, there's still some open space on the third line there. Probably it's just endgame moves. But basically, when you have all of your stones are alive, well, actually, black does have the peep here, which would set up forcing moves such as this one. So black does have some potential to play some forcing moves, forcing white to reinforce the connection there while taking some extra territory. But since all of the neighboring stones are alive, I don't think pushing through and cutting would actually work. So if we say this is not going to work, then it's just a territory thing. That cut could be dangerous, but let's forget that one. And so at some point, black's going to switch maybe to the lower part of the board, which is, there's more stuff that could potentially happen towards the lower side of the board. So for instance, moves like this. Setting up a position on the lower part of the board would be something I would be considering. Maybe this one. Oh, he did that. Okay, great. Sometimes I get it right. Okay. James Sedgwick has given us the fine art percentage. Shin Jinseo is at 96%. That's pretty big. And Shin Jinseo is well known to he seems to be able to keep the lead. Like for even professional players, 96% is still pretty much undecided in a position like this where, let's see, how many moves are we into the game? We're only 80 moves into the game. So like there's something like 150 to 200 moves left to play. Playing against a computer program. The computer program would, if I played against a strong computer program, it would gradually catch up to me, and I would have difficulty winning even a huge advantage like this. It's just that it catches up 1 point at a time, or a fraction of a point at a time. Even if I don't make any obvious mistakes, it would actually be difficult for me to keep this lead. So, but Shin Jinseo was really good at that. So even with human players playing against human players, there is the potential here of this being turned around, depending how they continue the game. So, it's still not over, but Shin Jinseo is very sort of notoriously good at finishing these games, and keeping his lead. So, I think I'm ready to finish for this particular game.